Hello everybody, I'm Indie Dev Dylan and welcome to another devlog on Hero. Last video I discussed the changes I made to the enemies, specifically the turtle and bunny. If you didn't see that and want to check it out, hit the eye icon on the top right corner. While recording and working on the last video, I encountered some unusual behaviors with the new enemy AI. One of them being the bunny getting stuck on walls. I fixed this by applying a frictionless physics material to the rigid body. I also have decided to temporarily remove knockback, due to it being inconsistent with how far it pushes the player. I also wanted to change how I handled enemies being loaded off camera. Originally I had them stop moving. Now I have them get deactivated after a set amount of time. Changing this, I ran into some new bugs. One of these I recorded in this clip, where the bunny is constantly being activated and deactivated. I also ran into a similar bug when the player goes into their crawling state. With the way I designed the crawling state, the player would deactivate a standing collider and then activate a crawling collider when you crawl. There was a small window where the player didn't have any active colliders, which is needed for the enemy's activation colliders to detect the player. The bunny slowly falls and defies gravity. I fixed this by having both colliders active when standing, but when you crawl, the standing collider goes away, and the crawling collider stays. Another issue I had to fix was this one. The bunny decided to not jump when colliding with walls in a particular way. The issue was the detector that checks for a tile in front and above the bunny was setting the bool to true, therefore causing it to have a jump force of 0. After pairing this and the wall detector's bool in an if statement, I still received the same issue. I sorted it out, and hopefully it isn't a problem anymore. The bunny was the most problematic out of the two, which is odd to me, because the bunny just jumps, but the turtle did have some issues unique to it as well. For some reason, the turtle would not go up slopes after reaching a certain point, but only when attacking the player. Luckily, I fixed this. Another issue with the turtle was found in the first level of the game. When encountering the very first enemy, if the player stood in a particular area, the turtle would see the player, attack, and then after they gave up and were starting to forget, they would start to return to their patrol spot. But because the player was within a certain range, the turtle would quickly turn back around due to the enemy having detection from behind and the player being in that range. I countered this by doing two things. First, I chose to use this issue to change how detection from behind works. It used to be based on the difference between the player and enemy only on the x-axis. Now it is a distance between the two positions on the x and y axis. Next, when the enemy is forgetting, it now can't detect the player from behind. Now that we're done with the issues that got fixed, it's time to talk about new features. As mentioned in the last video, I've now fixed the way the slingshot works. As you can see, it shoots at varying distances now. Also mentioned in the last video, the two versions of the squid have now been updated with similar mechanical improvements as the bunny and turtle. The shooting squid still behaves the same way, but now gets unloaded after the player is too far away. The moving squid can now patrol and is able to see the player from all directions. Next, I wanted to fix the camera. Originally, I used a script to expand the size when the player moved, but with the way I designed the camera, it didn't translate the way I wanted it to when expanding. So I made two separate cameras with their own individual settings and used the state-driven camera to transition between them. The change isn't that big, or maybe even that noticeable, but it will help me out in the long run. A big topic in the previous video, and a very important goal of mine for my game, is having controller support. With the version of Unity I was using, I could achieve this, but only to a certain extent. The game was built using the original or default version of the input manager. I could define what key goes to what actions, as well as define what controls on a controller go to that action. But I can only really do this with one controller, as the way the input defines controls really applies to all controllers, but in different ways. For example, when building the demo, I had some support for a PlayStation 4 controller, but if you connect an Xbox One controller to the game, the left analog stick would be able to control left and right, but you would have to press down and up. But I knew there was a solution: the new input system. I want you to be able to use any controller you want, and not require a specific console's controller. So, I've been troubleshooting an issue with other versions of Unity I install, and just a week ago, I was finally able to successfully open and run a project in a 2021 version of Unity. I created a new project and opened it up in this new version, and so far, I haven't ran into any issues with this change yet. The only issue I encountered was this bug with the animations, but that had been around since the demo and was unnoticed until the change and was quick and easy to fix. So now I'm moving into updating my input system to the new system, and so far it has been relatively simple. The transition for the two input systems isn't one-to-one, but I believe I will have the inputs ready for the next devlog. The game currently has inputs for a PlayStation 4 controller, Xbox One controller, and a Switch Pro controller, as well as keyboard and mouse support. So, yeah. I've spent the last 3 weeks working on fixing bugs with enemy AI, adding improved AI to all enemies, fixing the slingshot, fixing the camera, and updating my game to a new version of Unity. I'm very excited about what's to come in the next devlogs, so stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining me. I've been your host, Indie Dev Dylan, signing out.